Hey everyone, welcome to Security Live. Security Live is a YouTube show focused on AWS and AWS security partners, and we come together to talk about security challenges that we're working on with our customers. We stream every other Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, which is 3 p.m. GMT time this month, but other months it's not, daylight saving. My name is Margo Cronin. I am a Security and Compliance Specialist SA with AWS, and I'm joined today by my co-host.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening, everybody. My name's Rob Hale, and I lead AWS's security partner business in EMEA. Actually, we're not just on YouTube, Margo. We're now on Twitch, we're on Facebook and LinkedIn, so you can now find us on 4 different platforms.
And you can also get involved in the show. Actually, the chat stream is this way on my monitor, and ask questions of our guests as we bring them on onto each show. So that's definitely very true. It just felt like a bit of a mouthful to spew out all 4.
It does. But ask us questions. Definitely ask us questions.
And we can see people tuning in from South Africa, but I'm always amused actually by daylight savings when the hours change, because this month it is 3 p.m. GMT time that we're streaming, but usually it's 4 p.m. GMT time that we are streaming. But I always like it because it means it's springtime, and springtime is also summit months for AWS. Are you going to any good summits soon, Rob?
I am going to a number of summits, so I'll be very busy. We may even be at a summit and maybe streaming from a summit. We'll see. We'll see how that works.
I can't say right now. But
So we'll see.
Good stuff. So we're going to bring on today somebody who's been with us recently. Actually, when we were streaming last live, that was at Reinforce last June, or at least that was when I was last live. Maybe you guys have been live since and you just didn't invite me. But we had this guest here, so we're thrilled to have him back. And this is Martin Holste from Trellix. And Martin is the CTO of Trellix. And Trellix is transforming the future of cybersecurity with the industry's broadest AI-powered security platform using Amazon Bedrock. And then by harnessing AI and cloud technologies, Trellix help organizations and their customers confidently combat today's sophisticated threats and ensure protection for them. Martin, I think you can do a better job introducing yourself.
Yeah, one correction about the overall CTO of Trellix. I'm much more interested in the AI side. So I'm the CTO for AI and cloud, which has been a great combo for me and been really fun over the last few years.
That's very pertinent these days.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And feel like we're moving a mile a minute these days.
And when you were last with us at Reinforce, I remember we were talking about Gen AI. But like that was last June, which was 6 months ago, which is like dinosaur years in terms of Gen AI, the way the market has changed. What have you guys been up to since?
Oh, way back in the Cretaceous period. Yeah, that was a really, really long time ago. I'm thinking about all of the different things that have happened since then. But I think the similarity, though, and the fundamental theme is still the same, which is what we found be basically using AI to make decisions instead of having interactions. And I think that theme has definitely been true for the last 6 months. So I think that's definitely something that's unique. There's very few themes that you can point to that last 6 months in the AI arena right now. And that's definitely one of them. So happy to see that, and looking forward to diving more into that today.
Cool. Whenever I talk to customers, Martin, they're always there's a lot of AI hype, there's a lot of news, a lot of expectation around AI. But actually,
Mhm.
AI and ML and other models have been used in security for quite some time. So one of the biggest questions I get asked is, look, if I'm a security operations manager or a an analyst or a CISO, how can I make use of AI? I mean, is it going to actually help me in my role, or is it going to help my teams and my organization? What are you seeing in terms of what are customers doing and what is Trellix doing?
Yeah, well, I think it's understanding what tools are available for what jobs, right? So I had a lot of different roles for Mandiant, FireEye, Trellix, and that sort of corporate journey, and all very technical. Ran a labs group for a while, and got very into machine learning back in the day. And machine learning is still very relevant right now. So
Yeah.
at the AI and data conference in Kilkenny, Ireland last week, and we talked to a lot of folks there on not just AI, but around things like SageMaker and what you can do with that. But really, it's understanding scales. So if you have, let's say, 1 billion of something, that's not a Gen AI use case. That is something that you're going to do with machine learning, right? So you put in, whether it's Redshift, SageMaker, all those kinds of backends, and now there's a lot you can do in S3. I really recommend people check out all the cool stuff you can do on S3 now. Makes a lot of that management super easy and then feeds into a lot of those systems. But the point is, you're working at 1 billion of something or even 1 trillion of something, as we do. And when you're dealing with that, you're trying to whittle that down to something that's smaller, and that's where the Gen AI stuff comes in. So the way I kind of think about it is 1 billion is machine learning, more like 1,000 or a few thousand is generative AI, and then a few is human, right? So we're down to like 10. That's the human level. And whenever you're looking at any AWS tech, and then especially as it applies to security, that's really kind of the rule of thumb for that is having the right tool for the job. What I've seen is fairly interesting, though, on generative AI is kind of being able to use it to prototype backwards into machine learning use cases. So I've spent, or been with teams that have spent months trying to figure out how to get a certain anomaly to pop out of, the billing records or whatever. And what is just almost sad is that you can take, we'll call it 100,000 or something, and drop that into Bedrock and say, what are the weirdest 5 things in this 100,000? And it'll say, oh yeah, these 3 weird things. And that used to take months of work to be able to, work with PyTorch and all the really hardcore machine learning stuff to get to that moment where you might find something interesting. And now you can just take that level of stuff, drop it in there once and say, okay, what do you think is weird about this? And from there say, okay, now we can work backwards from that, insight and figure out how would we do that at scale. So there's kind of 2 ways to look at it is, things that you can't start because they're too big in Gen AI, but then that rapid prototyping is, I guess, another one of those themes that's lasted for more than 6 months here in AI, being able to figure stuff out really quickly and to level that is going to matter for, the actual end use case or solution, and then work backwards to how do I make that industrial strength.
I think we're really in that kind of limit where, or that area where, we used to have this around security teams having developers in the SOC, and so they're able to, write a new parser or develop a script to help automate things. And I think it feels like we're really in the kind of beginning, the start of that journey with ML and AI for CISOs and security teams in customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have that sort of virtually now, but it all starts with what everyone has wanted to do, which is, I mean, we as humans, especially when you're security analysts, have oh, here's what I need to do right now. And then your first question is, do I have time to do this right now? And the vast majority of the time, the answer is no. So, I mean, when I think back to, running a SOC, there's this long to-do list that you've got, and you really only get to those first few things, what's on fire right then, right? And nobody goes into that basement of, oh, there's things 9, 10, 11 on the list. And that's really that hygiene. That's where the difference between, oh, we just got ransomed and our environment is clean is really down there in that. If you think of the Eisenhower quadrant, the important but not urgent stuff, right? That's where you've got to be able to go into. And I think what has been fascinating is to see that Gen AI in general, not even just in security, gives you the power to have it sort of handle those, not urgent but important things and at least take a crack at it. And that's been really helpful for us to see it. stuff that you want to do it, right? But you don't have to do it right now because it's not blinking. And that's the kind of stuff that Gen AI is real good at, because it doesn't get bored, it doesn't sleep. So it'll happily go and say, I'm happy to do this. That's the first thing it says, right? Whenever we put in a prompt, it says, oh, I'm happy to help you, I'm going to go do this. So leveraging that has been, I think, a real difference in pretty much all business, but especially in a SOC, and this is something that we're finding, using it to write plugins and things like that, and security content and parsers is a huge one. Anybody who's worked with log data knows that parsing is really, really annoying, but that kind of templating is perfect for generative AI. So we've got this fun thing that we've had where we had an internal tool that we used to do that parsing really quickly. And then we realized we could just set it loose on these environments and say, keep going until all the logs are parsed. And it just happily chews away at that in the background. And that's been absolutely unbelievable to see. It's a different team that I used to work with very regularly, 10 years ago. And the amount of human effort that used to be devoted to that, and the amount of tears shed over parsing logs. Such a great example of where Gen AI is taking care of the stuff that we just don't have time to do.
Are hallucinations still a risk, and especially now for SOC teams? And it was a question earlier on that's moved up there on the channel, but somebody was talking about models learning from models now. What are you seeing in terms of the management of hallucinations out there and how it's impacting SOC teams?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we do is a lot of model testing. And to be you need to have a good framework for understanding how well your models are performing and whether or not they're hallucinating. So when I was at that conference last week, I presented up showing, and I think we have this in our own webcast here, but trying to show exactly when models get it wrong and how to control for that. And I'd say the biggest guidance I have for you on any kind of model work that you're doing that is have it do multiple choice whenever possible. So you kind of meet it in the middle with your expertise. So that's what we do, is we craft a very specific framework for how we want it to conduct investigations. And we say, choose from this specific list how you're going to proceed. And then that prevents a lot of those hallucinations by keeping it grounded and presenting it information. Hallucinations start when the model is just trying to make you happy and you asked for something. And so it really, really doesn't want to say, I don't know. Even if you tell it, hey, if you don't know, say you don't know. It doesn't do that because it's been trained to provide answers. And that means that it's always going to try to do that. So by having it pick from a list, and it might be none of the above kind of situation, that can really help with that. But that's something we measure a lot. And so I can show you that now with some of the scoring that we've done across these models, and having this framework in place for doing that kind of testing has been just absolutely critical for this, because there's a different model every week, right? And so you have to figure that part out.
And I think that's something that our customers really, really ask is, look, which model do I use? Because you mentioned it earlier, if you use the wrong model, if you're trying to use a general purpose model for a really, really specific area of expertise or answer, then actually you might get a less accurate result, or it might just take an awful lot of time. So it's really powerful to know, which model should I be using and which use cases kind of work.
Yeah, so I have a chart we can go through here in a second to kind of walk through that. But I think just starting with that framework that we've got to be able to know that ahead of time that you need to measure it is a really big deal.
Yeah, and you're kind of touching on it there. You're answering the question that we're asking, but how do Trellix guide customers when it comes to selecting a model? Because I think what we're seeing right now is a proliferation of models out there, and very rapidly they're improving. You're actually seeing like the number of parameters are improving, the sizes of the models are improving, the way they use tooling is improving, hallucinations are dropping. So the choice is amazing, but it's quite overwhelming, I think, for CISOs.
Yeah, and I think there's not only the fact that some models are better than others, but there's some models are better for different use cases. And that's been a huge part of our learnings. So we figure out basically what their limits are. We figure out some tricks for getting them to go kind of punch above their weight and do better than what they originally could do with some tricks. And then we also have been able to figure out which models are cheaper. And this is a big part of why we love Bedrock, because it's got all those different models on it. So we can basically pick and choose. And I'll give you an example. So right now we use some of the cheaper, smaller models like Amazon Nova for doing some of the framework stuff. So when it's templating, when it's figuring out, okay, which kinds of security questions should I ask? That's where we can use Nova to be able to dig into those specific cases. And then when we needed to apply this giant breadth of knowledge from a bigger model, that's where we can use something more like an Anthropic Claude. And we've actually even gotten some really interesting stats now on the DeepSeek that was just launched on Bedrock here recently. So again, you don't know. It's every month there's a new model and figuring out which one to use. One of the really interesting things that we've seen is something called model regression, where if you have that testing framework in place, just because there's a newer model doesn't mean it's going to make the same decisions that you want it to make. And that, I think, is one of the more interesting pieces. So for instance,
regression. Explain it to me again. Sorry.
Yeah, we saw regression. So Claude 3.5 V2, which came out in October, I believe. V1 was in June. Yeah, there we go. Thanks. Is actually not as good as Claude V1 was at security decisions. And you think, well, why would it not make better security decisions? It was trained on more recent stuff. Well, the reason was it was trained to be more cautious. So what it was doing was anytime we give it, evidence to review, it would almost always say, oh yeah, somebody's definitely got to look at this. Somebody's definitely got to look at this, because 3.5 V2 was actually far more cautious. And if you're not doing that kind of benchmarking and testing to figure that out, you don't realize that when the model number changes like that, and you don't know exactly how that's going to impact your overall app. So you've probably seen a lot about prompt versioning. That's super important. What the anecdote I like to use is the number of exclamation points you use in your prompt matters. Going from 2 to 3 can actually completely change what kind of answer you're going to get. So every character matters. White space matters. How loud you're screaming in your prompt matters very much on all of this. And so you have to have that formal framework for figuring it out. So here's a clip from a joint blog post we did with you guys a few months ago, and actually I've updated it since then. You can see DeepSeek there has done quite well up there on the amount of detail that it provides. And so we look at this in two different ways. Is it making the decision that we want, and how good is the write-up that it's providing? As in, how helpful is this to an analyst? And there's a pretty good grouping up there in the upper right. I think one of the most interesting things that I've seen is with the new reasoning models actually being not as good as the non-reasoning models, because they will talk themselves out of the right solution, which is really funny. So they'll say, yeah, I think we should do this, but then they'll backtrack and say, oh, wait, but what about this? And what about this? And they sort of lose confidence in their initial decision, and they end up with something that's, more, I guess, cautious, right? So similar to V2 was looking at. So we've actually seen better results on Sonnet 3.7 without the reasoning enabled for security decisions, which is really fascinating. So again, it's being able to see behind the scenes on all of this and track it. And then, as I mentioned before, that there's a big difference when it comes to cost. So here's another one that you're going to see. And this is why we love Nova so much. Nova lets you do things that you could not do before from a purely a value perspective. So you see how you can't read any of the labels down there at the bottom? That's because even though some may be, 2 or 3 times cheaper than some of the others, when we talk about the order of magnitude and pricing, that's what really matters. We're talking about use cases. So micro is up there at the top. If you can get it to work in micro, you can start to do things you could never even think about before. Yeah. And that's really the other side to this, is all the use cases that no one has even considered on doing this kind of stuff. And that's what we love about it. So we're able to basically have our cake and eat it too, because we use the heavy duty models for the really difficult, intricate decisions. And then we have a ton of utilitarian cases that we can slice up with things like micro and light, which actually do a great job in a lot of areas.
That's really.
Yeah. I was just say, if you hit the QR code there to get to our landing page, we go into a lot of detail on some of the stuff there. So if you're interested in this and some of the other use cases that we've got there, by all means, check out our page there.
And click on get a camera, QR code, go and find some cool use cases. I've got a couple of questions from the audience, actually. So the first one is, Kalina, we are live.
We're
Everyone wave, we're definitely live. And we're going to prove that by asking a question. So Venkata says, how do you adapt to new models every month?
Yeah, and this is how you do it. You need to be able to create a chart like this on demand. So this is the cost chart. That's a little bit, maybe you don't need that month to month. You get sort of an idea based on model size and the quality of them. But this is the kind of stuff that you need to be running on. Anytime you're going to even consider changing out the model ID in Bedrock that you're using, you need to have this as part of your QA process. And here's another really important thing you need to know. If the model says the thing you wanted it to say one time, that is not your QA process. You have to run that 10 or 100 times and make sure that you get the same response every time. And this is something that I think all engineers are struggling with right now. We have been essentially using computers in a very finite deterministic way where you say, if I do this input, I'm getting this output. That's the promise that computers made us, right? That's why it was different than a human, because you always got the same answer. Well, this is computers folding back towards what humans do, and they flip a coin a lot of the time. So it's really interesting to see how much the answers will change completely based on just time. If you hit regenerate and ask for the same thing again, it might give you a totally different answer. It might not hallucinate, right? It might give you a very reasonable, well thought out answer, but it might be totally different. And it's been fascinating to see security use cases where we say, hey, does someone need to look at this alert? And it basically flips a coin. Half the time we'll say yes, half the time no. And when we as a human, we look at it, we say, yeah, I could go either way on that one. I agree. That is one that it's not definitive, right? And so that's when you're doing QA process and you're doing this testing, making sure that you are doing it not just once or twice, but 10 or even 100 times to make sure that your things are absolutely rock solid is a big part of knowing and having that confidence to move to the next version of that model.
So my next question is around, where do you, and it'd be great to hear how Trellix are doing this as well. So when do you know, or how do you know if a human is the best answer to a use case, or a model, or more like a combination of both? So how do you do that within Trellix? And can you talk about some of the use cases that you have internally for AI in security?
Yeah, and I think a great example is some of the advances I've seen in Claude Sonnet 3.7 and its coding abilities. And that sounds like a really specific thing to say, but I'll detail it. So Sonnet 3.5 was good at writing code, but it could write about this amount of code, right? It'd be good at like a Python function. But if you said, hey, write me an app, most of the functions in there would be placeholders, and it would say, here's where you would do this, and here's where you would do this. Now, we've been on 3.7 now for about 3-4 weeks here, and it will write most of that application for you. It'll write several thousand lines of meaningful code, and that's a big difference. But it will then get lost in its directory structure. So it'll make this amazing app and then try to change directory, and you'll see it look like a mouse lost in a maze where it can't get out of its own directory. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is that we're starting to see a real shift in the amount of things that it can do. But we're a long way from not needing humans on this stuff. These things get stuck in their directories a lot. So it's really being able to figure out first of all, how do I set it up to perform well? And this is kind of a classic managerial task, right? Anyone who's managed people, how do I make your job goals really clear? Okay, give it set goals and make them well scoped so that it knows what it should and shouldn't do. But that requires human supervision, right? So we're a long way from saying, oh, AI is going to run the place. It can do really specific things. It can take a lot of that boring work like parsing off of our plates. And it can even start to write, more code than we're used to and start to refactor code and things like that. But understanding that the code needs to be refactored, that's still something that humans are very involved with. So really what it's doing is taking out a lot of that busy work. And it's funny, I've been, an engineer for a long time. And, it's a joy for an engineer when they actually get to do their work. Right. Most of the time they're stuck in meetings, figuring out exactly what needs to be done. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. I mean, I don't think you can say, oh, review all of our notes and figure out what really needs to be done from an AI perspective. We're not there yet. We still have a lot of room to grow there. So I think just understanding what needs to happen is still very much a human thing. And then just the relationships. That's so much of not just business, but life in general is about managing those relationships. So figuring out when you can farm things out as a very specific task to AI, sure. But I think the vast majority of what we're doing day in, day out is actually a lot less technical than we realize. And so I think it's still very relevant.
What common mistakes are you seeing customers make when it comes to farming tasks out to AI? Is there something you kind of see happening a lot and you think, well, this will go away probably in time, but right now, 7 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 problems are this?
I think they're not being adventurous enough. And I think part of that is probably because they don't have a test framework or something like that in place to, verify what's happening. But I think that they are really selling short what AI can do. So I kind of just talked about what it can't do, but I don't see nearly enough of, approaching every situation. And maybe it's just because I'm so inherently lazy, but my first question is, can I get AI to do this for pretty much everything, right? And that's I think a good default going forward is this something that AI can handle for me? What should I really be spending my time on? And maybe that's, enjoying the sunset in certain cases, right? So it just depends. But that's, I think, my number one recommendation is for people to be a lot more optimistic and adventurous with the models, because they're only going to get better. In fact, a few months ago, I saw some talk about, we hit this plateau with model quality. And that is not the case. 3.7, I think, absolutely proved that. Like I just talked about, the coding abilities, but just other things that these models can do. They're going to get better and better, and understanding how you can harness that and take advantage of it, I think, is really the key.
What do you think it's going to look like in a couple of years from now? What do you think? What's going to happen? Are they going to speed up? Like we've seen kind of models like the release speeding up recently. Is that going to keep up that traction? And what do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the quadrillion-dollar question, right? Is what's going to look like in 2 years? So first of all, I would say 2 years is in a ridiculous amount of time to estimate.
That's a long time in AI.
That's
a long time in security, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, what I go back to is the 80% of what we're doing still isn't technical, like I said. And I think that is kind of the aperture that you want to use to see how wide is the opening for AI. How much are people doing, and how much, actual work is part of a deliverable. And it's less than you think. And so I think that tells you that there's a finite amount that AI is going to be able to do there, even especially around, I would say, relationships. So I think that's probably the overall limiting factor. And you're looking at 2 years. But then, anything that's currently limited by how much AI can consider, how good its response is, those are the things that we're just seeing the beginning of. We're seeing geometric growth and the improvement there. And we've not even started with the really AI training, AI stuff that you're going to start to see. I think the biggest question going forward from, technical use cases is so I don't code in Java very much, but AI can code in Java, but I can't check its work. So the frontier that we're now approaching here, and we're going to see that probably the end of Q2 of this year, is where AI is creating things that we don't understand. And we have to basically take it at its word, or figure out a way to have it craft a test to prove that what it did is working. You're starting to see that in bioscience, right? With this is why I'm very much an optimist that AI is going to be a good thing for society, not the Matrix model where it's going to take us over. I think if you're looking for getting to Mars, if you're looking for curing cancer, living longer, better lives, AI is going to do all of that for us. I think that's inevitable at this point, which is great news. But like I said, it's going to be doing that, and we're not going to be able to check its work, because that kind of low-level stuff, very few today can even do it in the first place, and it's going to surpass them shortly. So I think that is the real quintessential question for the next couple of years, is how much we're going to be able to trust AI to be off on its own. And I think we're going to need formal frameworks for being able to have it, provide proof that what it did is what we asked it to do. And I think that's going to be one of the big questions.
Awesome. Now you're being... Go on, Margo. Sorry.
Well, I was about to say, we're actually coming to the top of the hour, and I want to know, will we get to see you at Reinforce again?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had an awesome rooftop party, I think, for the last 6 years. So if you're at reInvent, I think it's in Philadelphia again this year, or sorry, Reinforce, we're gonna have another great party there, and love to see everyone, all of our customers show up. But I love talking with your colleagues at AWS and just catching up on the latest. So we'll certainly be there. We're also at a lot of the summits. Again, check out our page there. We have on the QR code. It's got a list of all the places we are, and I'm in most of them. So if you want to hear me talk even more about this or tell me I'm wrong in person, please meet me there, and love to hear from you.
And there we have it, folks. Come and see AWS. Come and see our partners like Trellix at all the summits. And if you're going to Reinforce, we'd love to see you there as well.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
All right. Thanks all.
We're like the
Hello and welcome to AWS Security Live. My name's Rob Hale. I lead AWS's security partner business in EMEA, and I'm joined today by my amazing co-host, Margo.
Hey there, my name is Margo Cronin. I am a security and compliance specialist SA based in EMEA and in lovely sunny Switzerland.
You get to be in Switzerland. I'm in the UK. We have customers from around the world. You can see us every other Tuesday. At the moment, it's 8 until 9 Pacific time. It's 3 until 4 GMT, and it's 4 until 5 CET. Wait till the end of the month, and we'll obviously be changing in Europe for daylight savings time. But for now, we're here. We've got some amazing guests. So I'd like to introduce our first guest from Fortinet. So Aidan Walden, come and join us.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Welcome to Security Live.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I was with you all, I think, about a year and a half ago or a couple years ago. Last time we did Reinforce, right?
Awesome.
You guys were at Reinforce this year as well, right? I remember seeing your big stand, like the big red canopy. And I remember we had the bookcase behind us, but behind the bookcase was Fortinet. I remember.
That's right. Yeah, we had a good line of sight from the production booth there. Yes, we are absolutely invested in Reinforce and many of the other AWS events. They are fantastic for us and for our customers. So, yes.
Awesome. So I think everybody knows about Fortinet who's in security, but what do you do for Fortinet, and what are you here to kind of talk about on this episode?
Yeah, so I really lead all efforts cloud engineering at Fortinet. So that includes network infrastructure as service, application security, and platform security via SaaS programs. So a lot of the product focus, but what we find and what I am most passionate about lately is helping organizations find success in the cloud, which is not always easy. There's so many resources and so much information that you get from a cloud estate like AWS. How do you operationalize all of that? It's been such a challenge, and so the security operator is really near and dear to what we're focused on.
And there are also an awful lot of services out there, right? And a lot of products. I mean, when I'm with customers, that's actually one of the most common things I'm dealing with in the area of threat detection and incident response. And all as we have a lot of services, right? There's like 12 services in threat detection, incident response, about 60 services across security itself. So I think that's actually something where you guys really help a lot in bringing that kind of consolidation together.
Absolutely. We always advocate for customers. It's not a this or that, it's a this and that. The AWS services expose a lot of what's happening in your cloud environment, in your AWS estate. It's important to have those things turned on so that you can harvest all of that threat intelligence, and then you can do something with it, right? And the doing something with it is ultimately what the tools should do, right? That we provide. So yes, it's always a better together story, I think.
That's a key thing to remember as well when if you're a security professional and you're looking at things like threat detection and incident response, is knowing the platform you're operating on as well, because some of the mechanisms and tools might be different, but the processes are probably the same. So what's important for you from a threat detection perspective on AWS in terms of three things that a customer should be enabling in their environment to help with threat detection?
Right. So really just having all of your signal opportunity turned on, your CloudWatch, your flow logs, your inspector, piping it through Security Hub. These are fantastic tools. Ultimately, what you want is to build a bigger and bigger haystack, and then you need a better way to filter through that haystack for what is the thing to do now. And that's the challenge. It's like, what is the priority that I have to solve for right now? And that's the difference between being compromised and allowing a threat actor to exist in your environment for a long time before you even get to identification and remediation. And so, we talk about tooling. And I've talked with you both about this before. It doesn't start with tooling. It's understanding how your individual organization is modeled so that you can build appropriate workflows and understand, how do I align tooling to responsibility, and who's going to be accountable for the action. And then the tooling, should fit that, but also provide you the scale and the efficiencies. So it's never been a question of, are there tools out there? There are a lot of tools out there. It's, are they mapped to my organization in a very effective way to make my SOC as efficient as it can be? Because there's, that's really the challenge that is not going to be overcome. I'm not going to just start hiring lots and lots of people. SOCs typically run pretty lean in most organizations, even very, very large organizations. And so, that there has to be this happy marriage between the tools and the workflow.
You're touching on something there, I think that's really important. And that is, we talk a lot, and especially, and I think we'll be talking today about Gen AI and SOC, but some of the best practices, the fundamental best practices that we learned years ago, that we learned in college, that we've been applying for years, still apply. So you're kind of touching there on the importance of roles and responsibilities. I think another one, data, the fact that like kind of some of our best practices around data to this day will still apply no matter what generative AI you're using. So it's quite interesting to hear like you touching on this notion of the roles and responsibilities within SOC.
Yes, in the cloud estate, there are many roles and responsibilities that you don't typically think of, like the application developer. I mean, the whole cloud environment is their sandbox, right? So how do you recruit those individuals into the security practice in a way that doesn't gate the work that they're trying to deliver? And that they can be made aware of where there are opportunities to improve the security posture of the application, and they can do that in the natural flow of their delivery process. And that starts with helping them locally inspect software, deliver it and inspect it through the pipeline, and then once it's in production, to be able to understand, okay, this is happening to me. This is not necessarily a global threat, but it's a very targeted attack on me, or it's something that is newly discovered, maybe not even a CVE. And how do I get that information back upstream to the stakeholders, right? Based on what their specific role and responsibility is. And we can map those things now. And, Martin talked a lot about, AI, and AI is really enabling us to provide very specific educational tools to operators and different individual stakeholders, so that we can provide them with information and that is very specific to their role and responsibility. I'm not going to tell an app developer what a 5-tuple is on a security threat. I'm going to tell them, hey, you have a particular library, or this line of code has a particular vulnerability, or you embedded some secret by mistake. And like, that's what you need to know, right? And the security operator needs to know that there's a command and control server that's attached via bad DNS, and I'm going to provide them a specific notification that looks very different from other people. And then, if I'm talking to the CTO or CIO, I'm telling them here's where we are at a risk baseline, and here's the types of threats that we're facing right now. So but I can provide all of that information to various stakeholders from the same set of data that AWS or other parts of my estate may be providing. It's just how you piece it together.
I think that's a really, really important thing to point out, is that we've got a huge amount of tools and data sources within security, and that's not going to, there is consolidation, there is platformization going on with those tools, but the key thing is you need to have the data in a similar format so you can actually make sense of it and use those different tools. So how do you see that working in a threat detection and more importantly, a response perspective?
I'm not going to answer that question the way you posed it, Rob. It's instead of a data format, we can parse. And Martin talked a lot about it. We can parse, and we can take data, we can reformat it, we can ship it and normalize the data. I think what we really struggle with is signal to noise ratio. Like, I've got tons of signal and it's very low fidelity.
Yeah.
And so how do I improve the fidelity to actually make it actionable, but not also create the risk in remediation? Like, if I try to fix something and I break it, that's oftentimes as bad as having the risk. In fact, do you mind if I show you a little bit of what that might look like?
Yeah, please.
Let's have a look at this.
So let me navigate to a screen here. So I have a particular threat, and the last time that we were live together, we were talking about the acquisition of our Lacework platform, which we have named Lacework for the CNAP. A little bit of a name transition.
So that's Fortinet and Lacework coming together, and I think that happened around about the reinforced time. I remember that.
It did actually. The day we were together last, we were announcing this, so that we were very, very excited. But what this platform does, and why it was so attractive to us at Fortinet, was that it really creates the signal compression and increased fidelity that is very, very unique to this piece of property. So let's say, for example, I'm streaming every bit of log I can handle out of AWS, right? And what I'm looking at is what we call a composite alert, and it looks like 3 distinct events, but this really is comprised of hundreds or thousands of individual signal from AWS. So I know that it's likely not a false positive. And by the way, going back to the prior conversation, all of this is being handled via machine learning models. And I'll talk about a little bit more about how we also help the operator understand what they're looking at through an LLM. But this is running it largely on Bedrock, so a little bit of a Bedrock plug there. But when I look at this, I've distilled thousands of alerts down into the thing that I need to do and the thing I need to look at. So if I look at these alerts,
and these thousands of alerts would be originally from something like guard duty or security lake.
Exactly. So all of the above, right?
Awesome.
And what the best way to describe it is, I'm taking lots of alerts, I'm exposing the value, and I'm operationalizing it, right? So I'm turning it into something that, instead of looking through individual JSON outputs, I'm looking at it of what do I need to know? Yeah. And in this instance, I can see the history of how this attack was executed. There was a compromise on the host. There was a Linux execution and a persistent reverse shell implemented. So I can see that, right? And I see the hosts that were affected there. Yeah. And as I navigate through, I see, well, the Kubernetes environment was also compromised. That's running on that host. And I can look at the detail and the malicious activity and the processes and the applications that were run therein. And by the way, the system, how did this originate? The system added this tag on the end of the application name, vulnerable log4j, to let the operator know that this was sourced from a log4j issue. So in this example, we're tagging the actual applications. And then finally, I go and I look at the cryptojacking event that happened, where I can see that this workload in this Kubernetes cluster were used for crypto mining. So lots of information here, but if I need to look at additional detail, all of this is very well compressed for me. I only have the information that I need to focus on to provide a response. And if I'm the security operator, right, there are two aspects of machine learning and AI that are important in the security space, right? The first is what is above the waterline, like what I can see to help me do my job. And then there's what's below the waterline. Now, what's below the waterline has been around for a long time. For example, the machine learning aspects of taking all the signal, compressing it, getting the best fidelity and value out of it. But now what we're doing is providing the operator with an ability to interpret everything that's been provided to them to say, and this again is running on Bedrock. I can say, just simply, why should I care about this alert, right? So about this alert, and it's going to hopefully provide some information back that tells me why I should. Okay, so it tells me about the severity. So think about a limited resource pool of individuals who are trying to interpret all this data that's coming out of AWS. They may or may not be AWS experts as the SOC, but they are quickly educated and upskilled by the tooling, right? I think that's important. So this tool is telling them, hey, this is what's important for you to know right now about this. Here are the vulnerabilities potentially. I can ask it, further detail. Can you describe the cloud services involved as an example, right? So let's try that.
Is it easy to get it to identify how you should remediate the issue? And I know maybe this is prepared, but you've identified maybe it's a command and control server or it's an exposed Kubernetes pod. How how that SOC person should pass on the task or remediate?
Absolutely. So maybe I want to ask it, like, what are some additional remediation actions, right?
Yeah.
So here we go. I'm a little faster than the output being spit out, but here, isolate the compromised host, analyze the access logs for the compromised identity, which we call out the ARN for that particular identity. And of course, fix the keys. So it's giving them prescriptive guidance on everything that they should do. There's another side of this is like, okay, well, now I need to fix the issue. And we can use some extension on this tooling to say, all right, in a very low risk way, implement a remediation. Each will either a virtual patch, like block particular IPs or block a particular destination path, or quarantine a host as an example. Or, we can also provide triggers to the app developer to push a notification via, maybe a ticketing system to say, hey, like this application has been compromised. Here are the vulnerabilities. You need to patch the application. And those things can all happen in real time. And so when we've done time and motion studies, practically speaking, and this is repeatable, we'll go from about 23 to 26 hours of investigative work, and we do it in about 90 seconds. And that's 90 seconds is time to resolve. I can notify the app developer to patch their application. And so that changes the entire paradigm in terms of, think about like the scaling of the SOC itself and the human effort. So I have more upskilled individuals that are contributors. They're looking at only the information that's important, and I've just gained massive efficiency. This is, I think, how you really get ahead of securing the cloud.
I have to say, I think the most common ask I get from customers when it comes to dealing with threat detection incident response services, and of course I work for AWS, so they're going to be talking to me about AWS services, is just the amount of findings and how to prioritize them. So here you have prioritized across maybe 1,000 findings. You've come and you've reduced it down to 3. Is that, and I know doing live demos is awful, so you can tell me you can't demonstrate it if you want, but is it easy from this view to go back to say, the guard duty finding that fed this in, or some of the findings that were relevant, or is that something that's a different persona in the org? How does that work?
Yes, there is a way to go back to the original findings. For the sake of this small curated demo, I'm not going to risk the demo gods, as they say. But yes, you can go back to the original findings that were sourced. In fact, just a little bit of a view of that, like if I go back to observations, it should resolve. Here we have individual alerts that were of which this was composed. I can also look at some detail around particular, like if I wanted to understand in the MITRE attack framework, where do these particular threats come into play? So yes, we can backtrack to the original signal and what its source was.
I think that's super important from a customer perspective, because Margo, you said earlier, our customers have huge amounts of data coming through and alerts, and obviously that they're high criticality alerts, they're going to be absolutely on. That's what the SOC analysts are going to be dealing with those first. They're kind of the challenge is then, well, what do we do with the middle ones, the ones that we're not quite sure if they're a threat or not? And so being able to relate it to an attack framework and add some context in there really helps customers to prioritize and assess those findings.
Yeah, and that's where the idea of this composite alerting comes into play. It's the machine learning function is saying, look, okay, I could give you everything very quickly, but it's going to be noise, but let me actually pre-investigate it. And so maybe the time to glass, instead of being in 5 seconds, it's 5 minutes or even 10 minutes, where I've composed enough low quality signal together to say, like, this is an actual action. And here's how it's, relative to all the other actions that you're being asked to take right now. So to your point, Rob, it could be that medium level priority. And so, take care of these high priorities and then get to this. Or you can define workflows to pipe off certain, based on metadata potentially, like just pipe certain activities to other individuals who may have a specialty in a particular area. So that's where getting very specific in terms of customized workflow for your organization. You might have a group of security operators who are specialized in the ERP platform, where a lot of your PII or financial data is hosted. That might be an area where you segment a particular area of response.
How do you see these SOC departments transforming as a result of these tools? What do you think SOC departments are going to look like? We're already talking about how they're already quite, but this is something that really will empower them now going forward. Do you see this changing a lot? How SOC works?
I do. The SOCs. Not everybody is going to be a DevOps expert, so the tooling is helping augment skill sets in that regard, and helping the SOC implement the response actions in very colloquial ways. And Martin touched on this actually in the prior segment. I can talk to the system and say, hey, I need to collect data from AWS and VirusTotal and MITRE information. And by the way, I need to implement a remediation whenever you see a bad domain that's flagged as malicious, right? Yeah. And it'll build the automation for you in the script and ask you to check it. You don't have to know any DevOps work or have any skill set in that regard. You just tell it what to do and it will do it. Obviously, you have to check it to make sure it does the thing it's supposed to do, but you gain a lot of efficiency there. So, whereas there's a lot of demand for resources, there's turnover in the SOC, a lot of competition for those individuals who are very good. So you end up bringing in, level 1 operators who don't have a huge background of experience. And so we're having to provide them ways to get skilled very quickly and force multiply. So, what's happening is within that SOC, we're evolving it by providing them better SecOps tools. A lot of machine learning and AI is built into making them better. So it's an educational tool and capacity. we're also seeing, and this is a trend even for very, very large organizations, that they're augmenting their own SOC with outsourced SOCs as a service. So you might have your tier one SOC is an external entity that escalates to an internal entity whenever there's a certain criticality, but they're handling a lot of the low level day in and day out things. Or it could be the inverse. When you need some incident response capabilities, you don't necessarily have that in-source, but you have a team of investigative capabilities that exist outsourced by a managed provider. And we're seeing the capabilities of managed providers in the cloud and AWS space expanding significantly. We're seeing a lot more partners that provide security specific to AWS and cloud come online very quickly, actually. So I think that's a trend.
Yeah, we're seeing the same. In fact, and you know this because you've been part of the program, but AWS launched the MSSP, so the Managed Security Service Partners Level 1 competency, just to provide assurance around expertise in security operations on AWS. So if you're looking for a managed security partner, then check out the competencies, and you have a list of amazing partners who have deep capabilities in there.
Yeah, if I can comment on that, we have had customers ask us for recommendations of competency, MSSP competency partners. So it seems to be very important, and it has a lot of value there.
Aidan, will we see you at any of the summits or at Next Reinforce?
Absolutely, I wouldn't miss it for the world. So you'll see a very good presence on behalf of Fortinet. We'll be talking about our CNAP, our Lacework platform, which we're now calling Lacework for the CNAP. We'll be talking about network security and just about anything security on AWS. So please, make it a point to stop by and see us. I think we'll be at just about every event you have planned.
every event. That's a big list.
Yeah.
We'll be set up again.
Actually, it is a big list.
Yeah. And I think we have some questions coming through on the chat as well. It's been really well received. Your demo has been really well received. Insightful session at AWS. Great insights on AI-driven security, observability, and threat intelligence. Thanks to Trellix and Fortinet for sharing valuable expertise.
Nice. Thank you.
Awesome. And I will be at the Paris Summit and the London Summit in the coming weeks. So I really hope maybe we get to see you there. Maybe not, maybe just in the US ones.
Will you be in Philadelphia?
I will. Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
I'll definitely see you there.
Yeah, so I'm planning Philadelphia, Dubai, London, Paris, and a few others. So hopefully we'll be able to see a lot of our audience will be there. Amazing partners like Fortinet as well, and so we'd love to hear more from you and see more of you at the events.
Rob, you got Dubai? I can't go to Dubai because of my hair. It'll just go into a big microphone. They see me and they're like, "No, please go." I'm bad for the show.
That's amazing. So just the last couple of minutes actually, I've got a question, and so kind of frame this in a minute or so. So what are your top tips in terms of things that customers should do for to train themselves around good incident response and threat detection? What are mistakes, and do that in about a minute and 30.
Okay. The first thing is turn on your signal sources in AWS. Find a way to ingest and normalize those. I think I've shown one way to do that. But one of the first mistakes is just not collecting signal in the right way. So you create a lot of blind spots. Make sure you have proper estate coverage. Your infrastructure will continue to evolve and grow organically in AWS or other parts of your estate. So make sure that you're aware of what shadow space may exist and have quality coverage. And then define what your organizational workflows are supposed to be. What are specific roles and responsibilities? The biggest mistake I see, and I've talked to customers who say, I have every security tool. I have people you compete with, and I still have problems. And the problem is they haven't defined how people will use those tools, what their roles and responsibilities are. So it's a level of maturity in your security practice that needs to be achieved. And then the tools will fit. They should fit naturally from there. I see that as a mistake.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And then finally, understand what your focus is as a business. And there are really good partners out there. I see it as a significant trend to start to use partners. And I would say, look at partners that can help you.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Aidan. We're being thrown
Amazing.
I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Every other Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific. We're streaming live. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.